On July 11, 2024, the Supreme Court of Nigeria delivered a historic verdict affirming the financial autonomy of the 774 local government councils across the country. The ruling directed that funds from the federation account be paid directly to local councils, ending decades of control by state governments. Now, 1 year on, the conversation around the implementation, impact, and a future prospects of this decision is more relevant than ever, especially as some states have recently held local council elections and the FCT prepares to hold its own next month. Today on Business Express, we turn our focus to this historical issue with Dr. Umar Yakubu, Executive Director, Center for Fiscal Transparency and Public Integrity. You're welcome to Business Express, Doc.
Thank you and good morning.
Let's begin by asking you this. How far has the implementation of the Supreme Court gone, and are there visible changes at the grassroots?
Well, statistically, implementation is zero because that ruling was on July 11th, 2024, and today is 29th July 2025. Yet we have not seen any evidence to indicate that the local governments are receiving their funds directly as directed by the Supreme Court judgment and ruling of last year. If you recall, we had a program that was anchored last week by Agora Policy. It's a think tank in Abuja, and I tried to discuss these issues on why the ruling has not been implemented for 1 year. And the Honorable Minister of Finance was there to explain that there were certain administrative issues that they wanted to clear before implementation of the ruling. But for us from civil society, that is not near enough because the judgment clearly stated that the ruling should be implemented immediately, and that has not happened.
All right, we'll now go on a quick break. When we return, the conversation continues. Stay with us. All right, welcome back. Now, Dr. Yakubu, how do you assess the resistance or cooperation of state governments in allowing this autonomy?
Yeah, normally in policy implementation, it usually takes time because it's one thing to have a ruling and to have a policy change, because that has not been the practice for the best part of 20, 30 years, where the local governments have been getting their monies through the state government via the joint state and local government account. So it's normal for these things to take time. But what is important to do is for the government to explain why they have not implemented a ruling, because this spells a lot of things for our democracy, where a Supreme Court ruling should be implemented, and it was clear, it said immediately. So why that has not been done is very critical. Secondly, since the ruling last year, about 4.4 trillion, this data has been released to the local governments, 4.4 trillion naira. So you can imagine that what that would have done at the local government level in terms of schools, primary healthcare centers, markets, and all the things that are supposed to be the responsibility of local governments. And if you are aware that everybody resides at the local government, so that tier arm of government just has to work. That level of government, the local government, it just has to work. And they need to get their fundings directly so that a lot of all these poverty issues will be reduced in the country.
One major concern about fiscal autonomy of local governments is the risk of mismanagement. For instance, studies have shown that weak local governance structures can lead to inefficiencies or even corruption when funds aren't properly managed. So how governments balance greater fiscal freedom with the accountability needed to ensure funds are used effectively for economic growth?
Well, that's a valid argument, and I was hoping that during our policy forum last week that the minister may have posed that argument that the accountability mechanisms at the local government is very weak. Excuse me. And that is same at the state government level. If I could just draw you back a little bit, when there was a lot of argument about the removal of fuel subsidy, and because of that, states needed more money to pay salaries, they needed more money to do a lot of work, and now fuel subsidy has been removed for 2 years now. States are getting 2, 3, 4 times of what they were getting before. But you can still see that the deliverables are still very low. We're not seeing much more investment in healthcare, in education, and all those things that breed development. So it's the same problem you have actually if you release those funds to the local government, because the accountability mechanisms are just not there. Now, accountability mechanism, I'm not talking about building and staff. That is very easy to have. But to have that when monies come, how do you really account for them? And I think the ICPC some months ago has established an accountability mechanism where it will try to not only monitor the funds, but to monitor its usage, because monitoring how funds go to local government is very easy. Everybody knows that the local government is reusing them. But to set up a system where they'll be monitoring the utilization effectively of those funds, and that is what the ICPC is doing, but I don't know how far they have gone there.
In the 2023 Transparency and Integrity Index, only 7 out of the 774 local government areas had functional websites, all scoring a mere 31.25% in transparency metrics. And these obviously suggest significant gaps in accountability at the local government level. Now, what challenges do you foresee in implementing financial autonomy? And how critical is transparent budgeting in making local autonomy effective economically?
Yeah, one of the pillars for improving governance is actually transparency, like you mentioned, and we're in 2025. We're advocating for proactive disclosure of information, your budgeting systems, how much you generate, how much you expend, how much is on your capital expenditure, how much is on your recurrent expenditure, how much are you spending on schools. All these things should be proactively disclosed, as backed up by the Freedom of Information Act, and that is applicable to all public institutions. So those accountability gaps will be there, but what we need more to do now for the local government is there has to be enhanced citizens' engagement, where the citizens are involved in how their funds are expended at that level. If there's low level of citizens' engagement, we will go down the rail of how other tiers have gone, because governance actually entails citizens looking out for their funds and how they're expended. And if that does not happen, I fear that it may not augur well in the near future.
Yeah, speaking of citizens' engagement, fiscal autonomy is not just about money. It's also about empowering communities to have a voice in how resources are allocated. Participatory budgeting, for instance, has worked in places like Brazil, where citizens help decide local spending. How can greater financial autonomy in Nigeria encourage community participation in economic planning? And what impact could this have on grassroots development?
Yeah, first of all, they have to change the budgeting system in the sense that it has to be from bottom up, not for the local government chairman to sit down in his office with a few of his people to draft a budget of what needs to be done. They have to take what the local government needs from the people. So when the people give that information, that makes them involved, because they now need to monitor. So it's bottom-up approach, unlike how we're doing it at the federal level now mostly, and at the state level where they just budget and they implement. So that helps the fiscal autonomy, because autonomy goes together with responsibility. You can just have the money, but if you are not responsible with the funds you receive, it becomes a problem. So that is very critical. Secondly, citizens need to monitor how it's being expended, because if citizens are the drivers of the budgeting process, you will not see cars every year being bought, you will not see ACs being bought, you will not see all these computers that they keep to buy every year for procurement purposes. You see citizens know that they need healthcare, they need education, and all those other areas that need heavy investment to improve the living of the citizens.
So how can civil society organizations like yours ensure that citizens hold local governments accountable to prioritize economic development over personal gain?
Yeah, that's why we established the Transparency and Integrity Index to advocate for the proactive disclosure of these certain categories of information. There are about 29 indicators. I don't think we'll have time to disclose them. And there are a lot of development partners that are involved in it. So if citizens are asking for, okay, how much is our budget for this year? How much are we spending on capital expenditure? How much for recurrent? How much on gutters? How much on schools? All these things should be proactively disclosed on local government websites. Yes, now there are only 7 that have websites, and that is very poor. So we're advocating for more local governments. It doesn't cost much to have those websites, but not leave them empty, to have all the information we're asking for, at least for the last 1 year, because of the ruling just started 2024. So once citizens now engage with that data and that information, of course, there has to be a lot of training of citizens to even understand how to be to be checking all this information. So, but when they check it, they will now know what is going on at the local government level. They don't have to use the FOI Act or have to be asking questions, and there will be no need for law enforcement to even start a lot of these investigations, because the information will already be out there in the public domain.
All right, Dr. Yakubu, before I let you go, if you were to design an ideal framework for local government fiscal autonomy in Nigeria, what would it look like?
It will just have about 5 components around fiscal transparency, around open procurement, around citizens engagement, around human resources, because we need to know how many people are working at what capacity, and a very critical one around control of corruption. That has to be there, that element has to be there for that framework to succeed.
All right, a very big thank you to you, Dr. Umar Yakubu, for joining us on Business Express this morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me.
Moving on, the